Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, President of Career Club, and welcome to another episode of HR Chat. Thanks so much to my good friend Bill Banham for allowing me to guest host here for a few episodes. It has been quite the privilege, and it's such a pleasure to be with everybody who is part of Bill's listening audience. So thank you for that very much. So I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. Today we have Trapper Yates. Trapper is the VP of Global Compensation for HP, a company you might have heard of. And with that, Trapper, well done.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to be here. Good to be with you again on a different podcast this time.
Oh, that's right. So where are you calling in from today, Trapper? Where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm based in just outside of Boise, Idaho. Been here for about 9 years now.
Awesome. Very good. And so I introduced you as VP of Global Compensation. Do you mind just kind of briefly explaining what all is entailed in that role for listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role as VP of Global Compensation, we've got about 60,000 employees across the globe at HP in 60 different countries. So really important to make sure that we've got the right pay structures, that we're benchmarking to market. So my team makes sure that we're doing that, that we're, doing our budgeting and the accruals that we need for both our base pay and our incentive programs. Also deal with our HR and compensation committee of the board, our proxy work, basically anything that touches compensation space, job architecture, outside of just our sales population is actually managed by a different group. So anything with comp, with the majority of HP's employees, is kind of within my team, within my group.
Jeez, well, that is a lot. 60,000, you said, in 60 countries?
Yep. So it's a big company.
No wonder they hide you in Boise. So you're that's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah. Fun fact, actually, with Boise, we actually have a fairly good size office here. It was one of our LaserJet headquarters.
Oh, really?
Very, very legacy, I would call it, office, and still one of our largest U.S. sites. So our headquarters is in California. We have a very big site in Houston, Texas, which is one of our big hubs, Portland, Vancouver area, and then Boise is one of our big ones as well. So sort of hide me away in this really nice place, but then it's also a big site for HP.
Well, you're in a beautiful part of the country, no doubt about that. So we had looked at some different topics that we might discuss, and since your compensation pay would be somewhere near the top of the list, I suppose. And one of the big issues, that what in the past 12, 18 months has been around pay transparency, and different states have enacted different laws and things like that. Can you describe kind of what you're seeing and how you guys are starting to incorporate that at HP?
Yeah, so pay transparency, as you said, kind of 12 to 18 months, it feels like it's gotten even more traction. But I think things have definitely been underway for a while, and for a lot of the right reasons. By increasing pay transparency, you can close the gender pay gap. You can make things more fair and equitable for all employees. Younger employees absolutely love it. Like, why shouldn't I understand how I'm being, paid and how I'm paid relative to others? So there's some really good things about it recently, but there's also some challenges. Let me, I guess, preface it with that. But recently, a lot of states have started to implement legislation around posting ranges for the roles in certain states. And so that's one of those things where it's like, as an applicant, it's nice to know what might I expect to make here. And you don't have to go into it going, well, they're going to ask me what I make now, which that isn't allowed anymore either. But they're going to ask me now, and then they're going to try and lowball me and barely bring me in above that. Now it's, what's that range? And is it a range? Is a role I think I can do? That range looks nice. I'm going to go ahead and apply. So that's, I think, a sweeping a change that's coming. It was in 4 states. It's starting to get traction in other states. And I think as we move forward, it's probably going to be like HP at this point. We are making the move with all of our US-based requisitions to post the range.
Well, that was my next question. You guys just say, well, let's don't worry about what state we're in now. This is just our policy nationally.
Yeah, it is. Because I think, and there's a couple things with that. I mean, I think it's the right thing to do, but also it's like you can see the wave coming. It's going to be more and more prevalent. So rather than trying to say, well, if it's in Washington or California or Colorado, do it. Now it's like we also have a lot of rules that are, hey, our primary location is going to be Houston, Texas, but we also might hire in Vancouver, Washington, or Boise, Idaho, or et cetera. So it's safest, and I think it's easiest to just say, look, let's just post the range out there and put it out there for candidates to understand what they might expect in this role.
Yeah, it's interesting too to me because, now that it's become more prevalent, when I see job postings that don't have that, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like, kind of get with the program here.
Right. Yeah, it's surprising actually when you do see those, because I think most companies have kind of moved in that direction too. Like, if we're going to do it in 4 states, we're just going to do it in all states. But you'll run into smaller companies where it's like, we're just posting in Texas. That's not law right now. We're
Yeah.
not gonna do it. I think it puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage, frankly, because people want to see that and understand what the possibilities are. One of the things I think that's also a bit of a challenge is what companies are including as that expected
Well,
pay rate.
there's the next thing I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah,
Go ahead, please.
absolutely. So you look at it, and a lot of the legislation reads along the lines of expected pay range, and companies like HP and most large companies have a structure. But when you look at uh, do you go from the lowest possible pay range for that job in the lowest geographic differential up to the top pay in the highest geographic differential, you're gonna have this really big range. And I don't think it's very conducive to giving a candidate a realistic expectation. I would say at HP, where we started on this was saying, well, we asked the manager, what do you expect to pay for this role? And then we go 10% above and below. And I would say that was too narrow. So we've kind of shifted our approach a little bit, just so, because the other thing you get is internal candidates saying, well, that's my role. And the minimum for that's posted, because we did the plus or minus 10%, is higher than what I'm at today. That's a problem for them internally, even though the range may have been wider than that. So I think companies are balancing that right now. And I've seen both from the really wide to pretty narrow. And I think we've tried to thread the needle on saying this is the realistic range, without being too narrow. That's kind of where we've
Yeah, because sometimes you do feel like there's some gamesmanship. Okay, fine, you're making me do this. It pays between 50 and 200.
right.
Well,
Totally.
that's not a range.
We're generally
Roll with links.
yeah.
And saying, well, that doesn't feel like you're really helping a whole lot. Are there other aspects as you guys think about the future of pay transparency? And this may be a related question, or it might be a second question, but the point that you made of unintended consequences, or maybe expected consequences of, wait a minute, I'm not at that level.
Mhm.
You know, so where kind of is the future of pay transparency headed?
Yeah. So I think in terms of like unintended consequences or those negative things, the thing that comes to my mind is this study that was done years ago with California state government employees, and they reached out and said, "Did you know there's this link? You can see the salaries of individuals that work for the California government." And they sent it to a control group of people, and nearly everybody got that link, went out to that site and visited it and started reviewing, what did my peers make? What does this person
Yep.
make? And he got very specific with it. And when they did a survey before on like job satisfaction, they did a survey after. And what they found is for those that actually went out and looked at pay of their peers and their colleagues, those that were paid below the median for what their colleagues were making, were obviously very unhappy. They expressed more dissatisfaction with their job, more likely to leave. There was really nothing positive. And then for those that went out and looked and found themselves above the pay or above that median level of pay relative to their peers, there really wasn't. It was kind of like, that makes sense because everybody sort of sees themselves
As a long something.
right. Of course, I'm a good employee. Of course, I deserve more than the others. So there wasn't a really positive benefit. And so that's the challenge. Is it's really a balance of saying, on the look, people that see that they're paid lower are going to feel very negative. Obviously, people that are paid higher aren't going to feel more positive. So what's the benefit or value? And I think there's other studies too of direct transparency to seeing what everybody makes, and some of the dangers and challenges with that. I'm more of the opinion that, you don't have to understand what everybody around you makes in terms of their total pay, but understanding the sort of grading scale, if you will, understanding what your range is for your role, and perhaps understanding what the range is for that next role, so that you know what that progression could look like. So
Yeah.
where I see that going in the future, and I believe probably we're going to see legislation moving this direction as well. But I think a lot of companies are also looking to say, how do we be more transparent in terms of sharing the range that an employee sits within? And that's certainly front of mind for myself to say, we want to be transparent, we want to do it the right way, and we want to educate managers on how to have the right conversations, because sometimes, obviously at a big company, and I think at a small company, the manager might think, oh yeah, I'd like to pay this employee more, but there's a process, there's priorities in the business, and it's not an unlimited bucket of money to pay your employees more all of the time. So those trade-offs have to happen, and empowering and enabling managers to have better conversations about pay is the first step, I think. And then you get into giving higher levels of transparency for employees, hopefully avoiding some of the negative detrimental side effects.
For my own edification, when we're posting a range, you kind of brought it up a minute ago about what's really in that number. Is that, I come from a sales background, so we talk about on-target earnings or OTE. For a more non-sales role, it might be, base salary plus bonus.
Mm-hmm.
What are in those numbers? Is that strictly a salary, or is it included with some, upside or incentive comp?
Yeah, for sales. So when we post on the requisitions for sales, it is OTE, because most sales employees, that's the way they look at it, is they're on target earnings, and it's the way that when we have our structures internally, that's the way that we do our analysis and put it out there. So we do OTE for sales. For the non-sales employees, what we put out there is the salary, but then we also know that there's opportunities for bonus or incentive comp on top of that.
Okay.
And then internally, we've got, the bonus targets that employees are aware of, which I think is another nice thing in terms of transparency, that it's been years now. It was 2017 where we finally were able to say, like, down through, before it was only at senior leadership that had bonus targets, and then the rest were kind of on a bonus plan, but we were super upfront about what your target might be, because it depended on company performance. Now we say your target is your target, and company performance and individual performance can impact the actual payout. So I'm happy with that, at least shift to transparency. And it's been 7 years now, but it feels like it was yesterday. And what a win that was when we were able to move that forward for everybody.
Well, that's cool. Well, let's keep the conversation flowing, because there's another topic that we had kind of looked at that I think is very top of mind for a lot of people, whether you're talent acquisition, HR generalist, business partner, whatever, which is around skills. And it's a very big trend now, right? Skills-based hiring. We're seeing, at least from a policy perspective, companies for some rules dropping, like a 4-year college degree. I like the expression, potential over pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk just a little bit about, skills identification and, how you guys think about aligning the work and the skills?
Yeah, I think skills-based hiring and promotion and all of that there's such positive momentum around that right now. And so there's two important things, I think, when you think about skills-based hiring or anything based on skills. And the first is identification of those skills, and the second is the demonstrated proficiency of those skills. And so the first one, I would say we're on a journey here at HP on skills, and I think we're making really good headway. We've got a process to identify skills. We have a system employees can basically self-assess what skills they have. There's a process in a program that basically pulls in and gives them, hey, these are the skills we think you have based on your resume, based on your role. Now go through and select or deselect which skills. So I think that's positive. I think there's still, perhaps some gaps there, because an employee might choose to, let's think about LinkedIn. I mean, you can go out and put any number of skills you want. And I like the endorsement feature, but you can have any number of friends or family members, if you will, to say, yep, they're great at this, this, and this, without actually having any real understanding about how competent you are in that skill. So the skills identification is good. I'm seeing it really positive in when you're hiring for a role. It's parsing through resumes and saying, this is a match on, 80% of these skills that you have. But once again, it's using keywords. The second, and I think the harder part that I mentioned, is that proficiency measurement, right? And that is still a big challenge. I think there's a lot of quantitative types of skills where there are like HackerRank, and there's some others that are coding platforms that can assess skills in that domain. A lot of the softer skills, a lot of the skills that are used and are really important in business aren't as easy to classify or give a proficiency level. So, I think there's challenges, but also opportunities in that space.
So, or make sure I'm following you. Are you saying that you guys have tools that do some skills assessment, whether it's, existing talent or potential talent coming in?
So right now, I would say we're light on the skills assessment part. What we've got right now is a skills identification platform. We partnered with a vendor and have a system now that sits within our systems, and we call it Career Hub. That's where all internal employees go and basically upload a resume or something that can then parse out their skills. They can say, yep, I have these skills, or I'm good at this. They can do self-assessments. Managers can assess their competencies within that. But I think the next step on that journey is saying, great, now I've got an identification of skills, at least skills that they think they have and maybe their manager thinks they have. Now, how do we validate that against, industry benchmarks and things like that? So the assessment side is one thing that I think a lot of companies are still looking toward.
Yes.
And the next big challenge, I think, in this space. But I think there's also a lot of companies that are still looking to say, we want to be on the skills journey. We want to be able to hire and promote and find talent for skills. We're not on that journey yet. One thing I would say that I think is a really good future opportunity with this, one of the things that excites me the most is, I work in compensation. It's a function of HR. I used to work in finance, and finance, there's a fair number of overlapping skills in terms of data analytics and things that go really well together. But if I'm hiring a comp analyst, a lot of times those people in finance or financial analysts are not looking at the world of HR. They don't see those as opportunities. So the idea with this is, if you're on Career Hub and you've got your skills, it says, hey, did you know there's a role that is a 75% match to your skills? You've indicated you're interested, or you'd be open to an internal job change. Maybe it's something we're looking into. So for me in the future, that's what gets more exciting, is the ability to see outside your area of your current function or your area of expertise into things that you might actually be a really good fit for.
Well, I think it's very smart too, from retention perspective, right? Because I've been in finance, and kind of the road up in finance, I'm not sure I want to go any further down that road.
Yeah.
But there's some other parts of the business that could potentially be very interesting, kind of re-energize me intellectually, and I can learn some new stuff. And, it's like, well, yeah, gosh, if we know that Trevor's amazing, but just he's looking for a new challenge, why does he have to leave our company to go do that?
Yeah.
If we can do things that show, hey, this guy should be very mobile within our company, how do we help him? And if we can help ourselves by keeping a great performer and just, helping him progress in his career. It's funny, whether it's in our outplacement business or whatever at Career Club, we see people that believe that they have, quote, transferable skills. And yet it's very interesting from the hiring company's perspective. It's very much about demonstrated experience. Right. Do you have 10 years doing this exact thing? And if not, we probably don't want to talk to you. And, and if you do, it's like, why do you want that job? You've already done it for 10 years. How do you think about that? Hi, everybody. This is Bob Goodwin, president at Career Club. Imagine with me for a minute a workplace where leaders and employees are energized, engaged, and operating at their very best. At Career Club, we work with both individuals and organizations to help combat stress and burnout that lead to attrition, disengagement, and higher healthcare costs. We can help your organization and your workforce thrive, boosting both productivity and morale across the board. To learn more about how we might help you and your company, visit us at career.club.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there is a role within my team open at this point, and we're going through the same sort of thing. We've got some internal interests, and these are people that know our systems and our processes, and we think, well, they bring a lot to the table. But then there's a part of you going, well, it's also nice to bring in new talent and understand like what they're seeing in the market, what they've experienced. Maybe it's different. That new ways of thinking is good. But I see, or I'm feeling the same thing where I'm like, well, if they're external, man, they got to have everything we're looking for, and they have to like knock it out of the park. And part of that is because of the risk, the inherent risk you take when you're like, well, I don't know, this person, are they going to fit with the culture? Or are they going to fit with the team? How long is it going to take them to come up to speed? So I think there's challenges there. And I think with a company the size of HP or, other large companies, there are so many opportunities internally. And that's once again, going back to my comment, like the idea that this is going to enable greater career mobility within these companies and cross-pollination of talent and new experiences and growth. I've been the benefactor of that type of growth and experience myself. And grateful, having been 11 years at HP, that doesn't happen without growing and experiencing different things. And so being the benefactor of that, that's what I'm excited about, is you give those to internal candidates. External, I think there's also a lot of value in skills because, like I said, right now it's a keyword identification. And if they have those keywords, it's saying this is a pretty good match, but it's sped up. This is the first time we've had that system available when I've had an open rec within kind of my organization. And I've seen the way it is helping to identify candidates. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that it's doing a good job of that, because I think one of the challenges or one of the things that you hear people not happy about is, a real person didn't even look at my resume. And so we're not there. We're not at a point where we want to be there, but AI and this skills platform and identification is doing the upfront legwork. Say, here's top 10% that you probably want to look at. Here's the rest. And so it does become important to make sure your skills are a match to the role. And
well, I want to pick up on your point too, that, some of this stuff is easy to claim, a little harder to demonstrate.
Absolutely.
Marry that with the other well-made point, which is what we talk to clients about all the time, which is, for companies, hiring is an inherently risky business, and they're trying to mitigate their risk to the greatest extent possible. The reason this role is open is real work needs to be getting done. And if I'm the hiring manager, like, I need somebody that the quicker they can be productive, like, that's what I'm looking for. And notionally, I understand, an outside perspective and blah, blah, blah. All I know is I need this stuff that's not getting done very well, or I'm overburdening an existing resource because they're doing 1.5 or 2 jobs right now. So I need to make that stop.
yeah,
So, what we end up seeing is, particularly in a very tight job market like we're in right now, where you've got some really talented people trying to find their next thing, is you have these elongated interview processes, and multiple interview series, case studies, other demonstrations of proficiency. And I'm curious how you see all that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's value. Everybody wants to feel like we've done a really thorough job of vetting this candidate because, like you said, there is that inherent risk. And so I could see from a company perspective that, hey, the more interviews, the more people that have visibility into this individual, the better. But I also, from a candidate's perspective, it gets exhausting. One of the things that I actually like a lot, and it goes back to what I mentioned on skills and demonstrating and assessing that proficiency level, is a lot of companies, especially for technical roles, are implementing those things like HackerRank or Code Signal, I think is one of the others, where there's an assessment done. And I think it's a way to quickly see like how proficient are you. There are also, critical reasoning and logical reasoning types of tests that a lot of companies employ as well, that I think are good. I think there's questions by some. Is it really is it the testing the right thinking, or is it actually providing value? And perhaps there's some things to push on there. We do at the executive level an assessment process, and we're looking into doing it in the technical space, non-technical space for those below executives. We don't really have anything at this point, but I think that's an interesting space in the future to say, rather than elongating the process through all these different interviews, how do we actually say these are the important skills? It shows that they have it on their resume. Can we do a test or validate that? I think that's what we're trying to do in interviews anyway. If there's a better way to do that, that expedites the process a bit, even better. But it's definitely a challenge.
And one of the things, just like on these hacker things, is like, it also dials out confirmation bias, right? But I like Trapper. He's a super nice guy. We get on well, and that's really why I hired him, because I like him. It's just like, why don't we just run a little water through the pipes and make sure he can actually code the way we think that he can code. And it's the same in sales. It's the same in a lot of functions. Like, if you can find a way that is objective, fair, right, and predictive, then that is a holy grail thing.
That is. You'd have the holy grail. You'd be able to sell it for anything you want.
We're working on it, Trapper, but that's a different topic. So last thing, talking about career growth and career development, and I think you were sharing that you had met with a next gen group at the company. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So actually, fairly recently, our next gen group is our business impact network. They're our business resource group we used to call it Young Employees Network or Early Career Employees. We call it Next Gen now. And it's really it's a very broad group, but interns and new grads and things. So I recently took over as an executive sponsor for our group here in the Boise side, and had a session walking through compensation, kind of how to think about it. But I also shared a little bit about career growth in that, and share the 2x2 matrix. Business school graduates love the 2x2 matrix, and for me, it's something I think about a lot in career success. There's your exposure, and then your competency or your skills, and those are sort of the two axes that I look at as being important. And if you've got low competencies or skills and low exposure, I think a lot of times you look at new grads coming in this way, they're still growing and learning. That's an okay place to be. You need to learn, you need to grow, but there's not a ton of risk because your exposure is also low. The danger area is when you get into that, if you grow into high exposure and you still haven't developed the required competency or skills, that's a dangerous place to be. You don't want to be in a situation.
Quick definition on exposure. Exposure is visibility within the company.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So visibility, exposure within the company to being able to, influence and do different things like that. So if you have that high exposure visibility without the skill, that's obviously not a good place to be. Conversely, I think a lot of individuals end up in a situation where they feel like they've developed their skills, they're at a high level of competency in that, and they just don't have the exposure or the visibility within the company that they want. And a lot of times that's what these mentoring programs are for, or you need to find a sponsor within the company. You need to find a way to get that exposure and showcase your skills. If you don't, that's where we see attrition within those employees that are growing and learning, but they just don't feel like they can get anywhere. And so we talked about how to find mentors and really sponsors, and there's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor, but somebody who's in your corner and saying, look, I've seen the work this individual does. They're ready for that next challenge and giving that visibility. And then the top corner that's really the sweet spot. That's where you want to sharpen the saw. You've got the right levels of visibility and exposure. You've got high levels of skill and competency. It's a fun place to be, and it's where you can kind of do your best work. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say at that point, it's really about sharpening the saw, building
Yes.
relationships, and mentoring others and things like that.
So one of the things that we see, so you're also doing career coaching, executive coaching kind of work, is that the, on your competency and visibility is helping people document their accomplishments
Mm-hmm.
in real time.
Yeah.
Right. So I did great work. Now, one, I need to document that I did great work. But then to your point, if you've got a mentor and more ideally a sponsor, a champion who's helping kind of broadcast,
Yeah.
Trevor's great, and I'm going to tell people that
Yeah.
Trevor's great. But first base is being able to actually document and catalog, because when we find in the outplacement side of it, now they've left the company, they've lost access to systems,
Mm-hmm.
some reviews, maybe, just other work products,
Yeah.
right? And now they're kind of a little bit out of luck, or at least
Yes.
they certainly are handicapped in
Mm-hmm.
their ability for the next employer to
Mm-hmm.
show. But even again, to your point, within internally, whether you're the compensation guy, like I'm negotiating my raise,
Yeah.
I need to be able to defend why I'm going for the max raise or the max bonus, because I can prove to you, not that I want it and I feel like I deserve it. I think I can demonstrate and provide a body of evidence that supports, at least you're having an evidence-based conversation,
Yeah.
not just super emotional.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important. And I think a lot of companies do an annual review process, and employees hopefully take that chance to say, well, let me look back over my own year and do that and document it even better. And something HP's moved more toward is a quarterly conversation where it's like,
Yeah.
let's actually do this on a regular basis and actually a career conversation. And so I think it's been a positive move. But the other thing that strikes me as you say that is a lot of people get in a company. I've been at HP 11 years. A lot of people are a long time in a company, and you become a little complacent in terms of what your resume looks like, and unless you're having conversations or kind of freshening up that resume, at some point you might decide I need to find something different, or you might be, sort of forced to choose something different. And you're going to have to look back and say, what have I done over the last 10 years? So your point is a good one in that if you've been at a company for a while, keep that sharp. Make sure that LinkedIn is up to date, that your resume is up to date, and that you're keeping track internally of the things that are happening. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in the recency bias, and all you're going to be able to talk about is what I did the last year and what happened the last 9 years before that. Surely there were some big things that happened. Oh, but
And the corollary, that's excellent advice. And the corollary to that is building your network.
Mm.
That's the other thing that happens when you start to just get so a wall built around you,
Yep.
right? And you stop looking up to see, well, what else is out there and who else is out there in the whole world. And building a professional network, the worst time to do that is when you have to.
right.
It's the absolute worst time to do it. And so between, being current on your accomplishments, your competencies, making sure, to your point, your collateral reflects that. And then, but the most powerful thing is your network, and of where like a mentor, sponsor are part of that network. But you need something that's going on outside the company. I think it's another terrific way of, quote, sharpening the saw, is like talking to people who don't work at your company and like, hey, here's what we're doing with AI, or here's what we're doing with the compensation scheme, or here's anything. It's like, I hadn't even thought about that. We're not even talking about that. That's a great idea.
Yes.
So,
Important. Absolutely. Yeah.
well, I'm glad to hear that you're helping lead that for your next gen cohort, because too often it's advice that they're not getting. Right. And then you just sort of find out on the worst day possible, these are all the things I should have been doing.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that you guys are investing in people and kind of providing them with what sounds like very strong direction is really great.
Yeah, we had a panel, a leadership panel. So I was part of it just a few weeks ago. And the question came up about mentoring. And it's a great one because I think at HP and a lot of companies, you have these formal mentoring connections. There's these programs and they place you with a mentor. And I think there's value in those. But my perspective on it is the most valuable mentoring relationships are the ones that happen more organically. You can certainly choose it, but I think some of the people I look at as my greatest mentors aren't people that ever said, will you be my mentor? It's been, hey, let's stay in touch. Or do you mind if I connect to you when I've got issues or things to talk through? And then make those regular connections. And it's tough to do. But like you said, the worst time to do it is when you're in a situation where you need that network. You need to kind of maintain that along the way. And that's certainly invaluable advice.
So I want to be mindful of the time, listeners and yours. Is there anything that we didn't cover? We've covered a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you were hoping that we might have talked about?
I think we covered it pretty well. I feel like we covered a little bit of the gamut. I'm glad we got to talk about mentoring as well and sponsorship, because I do feel like that's such an important topic. It's something that, as I look back, like I said, on my career, it's those types of interactions and the network and the people have been the help kind of for me on the stepping stones. And also to your point today, it's invaluable for me to be able to connect with others in the industry. I sit on this strategic steering committee with Aon, which is like 53 of our biggest tech companies. And we have an annual gathering in person, and then we have quarterly and monthly conversations, just talking about the things happening in the world of comp and what are you doing about it? How are you looking at it? And those became really interesting in the COVID times when all of a sudden everybody was forced to work from home, and you had companies coming out with like Airbnb, hey, work from anywhere and do anything, any country for up to 90 days a year. So there was a lot of things there. And you were able to ask the questions, well, how are you looking at taxation? How are you looking at this? So those relationships are so valuable in anything, and certainly in careers.
That's awesome. Well, Trevor Yates, VP Global Compensation at HP, thank you so much for investing a few minutes today with HR Chat. And again, listeners, thank you so much. Bill Bannon, thank you for letting me do this. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
This episode of the HR Chat podcast is supported by Deal. Are you looking for an all-in-one solution to manage your global workforce? With Deal, you can easily onboard global employees, streamline payroll processes, and ensure local compliance, all in one flexible, scalable platform. Join thousands of companies who trust Deal with their global HR needs. Visit Deal.com today, that's DEEL.com, to see how you can start managing your global team with unmatched speed, flexibility, and compliance. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy this HR Chat episode.